All right, well, let's get started. Thanks everybody for joining. I am Greg Gallant. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Shorty Awards. Thanks everybody for joining. And we're really excited to start this new initiative. Uh, as you can imagine, award shows have had to change it up a lot with the new world that we live in. And we pivoted the last Shorty Awards on short notice from an in-person event to an online event that still got hundreds of thousands of people watching live and many more watching after that. And we were kind of thinking, where do we go from there? Just to give some quick background, we started the Shorty Awards a little bit over 10 years ago, honoring the best of social media. And then when we saw that one of the biggest trends in our entries were from companies doing social good, we decided to spin out the Shorty Social Good Awards about 5 years ago. And as you'll hear about on this panel, past 5 years, social goods exploded. And of course, just recently, there's so much more pressure on companies to show what they're doing, to make the world a better place, to push social change and a whole host of other initiatives. So we're excited to kind of be on the vanguard of that. And for this year, we've got the 5th annual Shorty Social Goods coming up in November. Entries are open now. The entry deadline's August 26th. If you have social good work that your company's been doing that you want to enter. But in addition to just doing an award show, we want to do a whole series of panels and get people together to talk about what trends they're seeing, what companies can do, what people who work at companies can do, and just what this all means. And this is the first time we're doing that. So we're really excited to bring you this panel. We'd also like to thank our partners at Donately and 50 and 50. And we're so excited to have their founder and creative director, Javin, here today, who will be on the panel. He'll be introduced shortly along with the rest of the panel. But first, I'm just really here to introduce our moderator, Ellyn Fisher, the SVP of Marketing and Communications at the Ad Council. For anyone who doesn't know, the Ad Council is a national nonprofit that mobilizes the energy and talents of the communications industry to make a measurable impact on critical social issues. I'm sure you've seen their work, even if you don't know it. It's a great organization. Ellyn has been a longtime judge of the Shorty Awards, so we're very grateful for her involvement. The Ad Council, she'll be too humble to brag about this, but the Ad Council won 3 Shorty Awards in the last Shorty ceremony. So very cool to see the work that they keep putting out. And actually, under Ellyn's leadership, I thought this was really cool and very aligned with what the Shorties are all about. The Ad Council implemented a program called Creators for Good, which is an award-winning talent engagement program for digital creators, actors, musicians, and athletes who want to use their platforms to create social change. So you could not be in better hands than Ellyn for learning about all this and for drawing wisdom out of our panelists. And with that, I will let Ellyn take it away.
Thanks so much, Greg. Thanks for celebrating our Shorties. So excited to be here and to moderate this first installment of the Social Good Shorties webinar series. I love the Shorties, who doesn't? And I especially love the Social Good Awards you guys started 5 years ago. We have an amazing group of panelists here with us today who are going to talk about social good from many different sectors and many different roles. But before we get to our panel, I just briefly want to set the foundation here. These are truly unprecedented times. We have no shortage of social causes, both in the US and globally. The COVID health crisis, racial injustice, the economy, the mental health crisis. As you can imagine, we've been really busy at the Ad Council. But what's been really so inspiring is how we're also seeing such a big increase in the number of brands, both recognizing that they have a unique role to play in social good and doing really incredible things to better society. And frankly, consumers and customers are expecting it of the brands that they follow and love. So we know that purpose needs to be at every company's core. Consumers can't just don't want brands to just walk the walk. Don't want them to just talk the talk. They want them to walk the walk. Just quickly, Edelman's 2020 Trust Barometer said that half of consumers agree that every brand has a responsibility to get involved in at least one social issue that isn't directly tied to their business. And 4 in 5 millennials expect their favorite companies to make public declarations of their corporate citizenship. So whether you're a brand, a nonprofit, a media company, or a platform, we all have a role to do something. We all have the power to do something, and we all have a role here. So, but how do you act in a way that's meaningful, that resonates, that creates impact? We're going to share some successes and some lessons learned. But before the panelists introduce themselves, our hashtag is hashtag Shorty Good. And if you want to ask questions throughout the hour, there's a Q&A right next to the chat in the bottom middle of your screen. And just do that throughout the hour as you have questions, and we're going to try to get to them a little bit later. So now let's meet our panelists. I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves and just talk for a couple of minutes about what social good means to them and their role. And let's start with Natasha.
Hi, everyone. Super excited to be here. My name is Natasha Aarons. Who am I? I'm a first-generation Jamaican American with Afro-Latina roots. So as a result of my background and upbringing, I've always felt an incredible sense of duty to use all of my roles in my career to help create pathways and access to communities who have been systemically shut out in an effort to do my part in driving social change. Whether it's amplifying their voices through partnerships, including them in campaigns, or providing small and medium businesses with opportunities. Now for what I do, I'm currently the US multicultural marketing lead at Google for our hardware line of business, the Google Pixel and Nest portfolio of products. And most recently, I was the US influencer lead for Google hardware. Great, I'm excited to be here, thanks.
Awesome, let's go to Rob.
Great, thanks Ellyn. Thanks for having me on this and the rest of these do-gooders. My pronouns are he, him, his. I have it on my signature, also go by they, them, theirs. Let's see, how do I describe this? Before starting the Phluid project, I was working in corporate America for 30 years, and I had a daytime job, and then a nighttime job was social justice, and specifically focusing on LGBTQ youth. And I decided to quit my corporate life and start my own company called the Phluid Project, which is a merging of my profession and my passion, which is retail along with social justice. And the Phluid Project is a really interesting, it's more of a movement than anything else. And at the core of who we represent are transgender, non-binary communities, young folks. But our broader audience is Generation Z and young millennials who just care about social justice, care about the environment, care about human rights. And the largest audience we serve are adults who really just give a shit, and they decide, like, why shouldn't you support a company that's built on values and built on human rights? So we founded the company on values, and the name itself says it all, what we stand for. Phluid is the space between two binaries, and the idea that we could exist without any barriers or limitations. The PH represents balance, and project because it's a group of people working together to make something better. And our mission is to make this world a better place through fashion, education, activism, and community.
Great, thanks. Let's go to
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ellyn, and thank you everybody for joining. I am humbled to be on this panel of awesome do-gooders. I love that word, so I will keep using it throughout this panel as well. I'm on our public policy team here at Snapchat. Snap or Snapchat, whichever is more familiar to you. It's a camera company where we help our users use the camera to communicate around the issues that they care about most. For my personal background, I am Jewish, and I grew up in Jewish day schools. We have a beautiful phrase in Hebrew and Judaism that is tikkun olam, which means repair the world. And I think that has been an ethos throughout my life of trying to see whatever situation I'm in, whatever resources I have, how I can contribute to a better tomorrow. For the demographic we're speaking to on Snapchat, we are reaching 90% of the US population aged 13 to 24. So a lot of my day-to-day is thinking about how I can make sure we have the tools in-app to help this next generation of Americans express themselves around the topics they care the most about.
Awesome, I love that. Javin, let's go to you.
Yeah, hello everybody. Javin, to give you a little background, I came from a digital agency background as an art director, and took my first kind of shift into social impact work with an organization called Invisible Children, working to end child soldiering in Africa. And from those two backgrounds, realized the need for digital agency and marketing that can really take these socially minded brands and move them forward into mainstream culture. So that's what we set out to do in 2009. So as of right now, I am a creative director and founder of 50 and 50, which we say is a digital creative agency for purpose-driven brands. And in that history, we also founded Donately. So I'm a co-founder of that product, which is a digital fundraising tool focused on helping those same kind of purpose-driven brands and companies manage their online fundraising. So in terms of what I do now, I think my job is to create beautiful, kind of compelling digital experiences and narratives for brands that need to tie who they are and what they need their consumers and donors to do with powerful stories of impact and social mission. And the organizations that we work with, brands like Qualcomm, the documentary, the Game Changer vegan documentary that just was recently released, as well as United Way, the UN, Red Cross, the list goes on. So honored to have those organizations behind the work that we do, as well as honored to be here. A lot of amazing people on this call, so excited to get into it.
And Jen from Univision.
Yes, hi everyone, and thank you to the Shorty Awards for hosting this awesome panel. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you, Ellyn, for moderating. On a personal note, I am a Latina from San Francisco who was raised also in the Catholic tradition of really wanting to serve your community and understanding social justice as a part of what we do in our lives. So on a personal level, I feel very lucky that I had that foundation, even with my family, honestly. My dad is probably one of the most vocal people I know, who's always, he calls himself the squeaky wheel because he's never afraid to sort of, question things. That being said, that's really helped me as I've grown in my career. And I now work at Univision, which is the leading provider of Spanish language content here in the US. We do everything from news, entertainment, music, sports, you name it, we do it on cable, audio, and every digital platform we can imagine. I work at the Creator Network division, which is basically our in-house influencer and creator network. And what we do is we partner with our influencers on brand campaigns, but also find and identify opportunities to collaborate with them and partner with them within the Univision ecosystem to help them grow their own footprint. Although my role isn't necessarily social good focused, it is part of the DNA of our company. At Univision, part of our mission is not just to entertain, but also to empower and inform. So in everything that we do, and everything that I do, because I do take that mission very seriously as much as I can in whatever way I can, we always try to find a way to make sure we're incorporating those three different aspects in everything we do.
Great, thanks, Jen. So we have an awesome panel of do-gooders, as you just heard. So we're gonna get started and get into the conversation. Let's start at the beginning. As we talked about, such a difficult time right now, so many critically important social issues today that are really urgent. How do you decide where to focus? Javin, do you wanna start?
Yeah, sure. So I think a really great place to start is in the foundational documents of an organization. I think every brand is built on values and on principles. It's a great place to start and to look at how that can tie to a really good mission and a need that's out there. So really looking into why your company exists. There's some simple things you can start with, even just sustainability, recognizing that every business has a footprint and you can pay attention to what that footprint is. You can recognize from your employees and from your leadership what things are going to resonate in talking to your team, just what's going to build interest and value within your team. And one phrase that was said to me that I think is really interesting is to look at the idea of your business's outcomes versus outputs. So there are things that a business does, but it doesn't necessarily have to correlate to the outcome or the reason it's on this planet. And so I think it's really interesting to kind of look at and spend some time assessing what it is that your business does and what it is that your business is going to be known for on a larger scale.
Awesome, anybody else? We can jump.
Yeah, I'll go if it's okay. I think it's important that, you talked about values and hopefully an organization has built values and principles and a meaningful mission statement into their purpose for existing. And I think a lot of companies haven't, but are beginning to bake it back in. And I think, you know,
Sure.
the one thing I noticed right now is there's like this shift going, like, hey, you know, we're supporting, you know, let's say women, and now we're moving to, you know, the Black population, and there's like shifts that happen without any thought or meaning going into it. And it's not like a donation is going to fix a problem or a promotion is going to fix a problem. It's making a commitment to being inclusive, inclusion, diversity, and equity, and ensuring that it's a long-term plan. And that can't be done with a stroke of a pen or writing a check. And it's got to be, or a post, it's got to be built into the organization. And it takes time, and it's a long game, not a short game, you know? And I think,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. And I think, you know, just so many people are just jumping on Black Lives Matter, and like, you know, all of a sudden they're paying attention. Well, this is, by the way, this is 55 years old, and we're just dealing with this now. And I'm glad people are waking up, but it doesn't mean that any other marginalized communities shouldn't be recognized as well. And I think that it has to be an inclusive effort to include all folks into the space, and whether it's your gender, your race, any one of your identities that makes you different or unique should be integrated and celebrated in a corporation or in any public space.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, you know, there are so many brands and others kind of jumping on kind of the social issue bandwagon with great intent, right? But you don't want to be one and done, and you want to be in it for the long haul. What is kind of, I would love to just hear from as many of you as possible, like your best advice for if you're not a nonprofit, but you're a brand, a media company that wants to get into the social good space, hasn't done a lot yet, or is really looking to integrate it better into their marketing plan. We start with Natasha. Oh, go ahead, Jen.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'll start with that. You know, I think one of the things, and I think, Rob, you were just starting to touch on this, you do not want to fall into the mistake of pandering. And I think when you lead with wanting to market, you are likely going to fall into that trap, even if the intentions are good. So, you know, I really recommend, if this is a social issue, if there is a social issue or social good that you are interested in, that you feel your company can, or your organization can champion, it's really important to start that at home base, your own organization. Are you championing that within your own organization? Whether it's through, let's just take a topic, for example, if we're talking about racial equity. Have you taken this into how you are doing your hiring practices, how you are marketing your content, who you are partnering with? There are things you can do before you start a marketing campaign to really start living and breathing with this is that you're working toward, because it's a process, right? There isn't a rule book on how to approach these topics, but there is a more informed way of doing things, and maybe a little bit more of a messy way of doing things. And again, I say that because some of these topics are sensitive, and if you're not well informed in it, you might like accidentally, you know, say something the wrong way. So I think it's really important to start at your own home base. Again, it doesn't have to be a big, huge marketing campaign. What are you doing within your own organization with your employees already to start uplifting that social good?
Yeah, and I can take that. Just from a marketing perspective, I think that brands need to approach social good as they would with any other marketing challenge, with a lofty goal in mind, a full-fledged strategy, and a plan that's actually going to help your consumers and subsequently humanity, and be consistent. And the one thing I'll say is that I cannot I cannot emphasize the importance of empathy enough in marketing, period. As a general rule, any brand should be obsessed with understanding who their consumers are. And I think as it relates to marketing your goods and services, and I think that's the foundation of being a good marketer. So for social good, it's no different. Brands should really be focusing and thinking about their consumers, their challenges, their personal challenges, and how your business or product, whatever it may be, may solve them, and thinking about the unique role that the brand can play in that. So specifically, when I think about the Black and Latinx communities, they have been disproportionately affected by COVID. From an economic and health perspective. And let's not even touch on the not to mention the years of racial injustice, which is the latest issue of the day. But what I would also say is that combined, those two communities have $3 trillion, that's trillion with a T, dollars in spending power. So these social good efforts are not just for for just good and they're just not. This is a business imperative. So I think that brands need to approach it as if it is like any other business challenge or strategy, and be really strategic, really approach your consumers with empathy, be consistent, not just do and move beyond just performative measures like posting on social. I think consumers these days are extremely savvy. And there's actually a movement on social media right now that we're cross-referencing brands who posted supporting Black Lives Matter, and then looking at their corporate board and their executive board and the lack of diversity. So I'm going to quote my favorite rapper, Jay-Z, here and say, "We don't believe you, we need more people." So you cannot just, it's beyond just being performative. It has to follow up with consistent action. So again, I'll just start it with, starts with empathy, but then it's moving beyond performative and putting a strategic, consistent plan. And I think that Rob said it best. This is not for the short term. This is for the long term.
If I could just really quickly add, Ellyn and Natasha, I love what you said. It's always good to be on a panel and be taking notes about what fellow panelists are saying. I love it. I think one thing that's also really critical, especially given bandwidth for these types of roles, for a lot of us, we're joking in the pre-brief for this panel, but like none of us have like a traditional CSR title. And I think that really does reflect how this is structured within the organization. You're not all going to have the resources you need to build out this work. And I think what's really important too is that you, as a single stakeholder or organization, don't need to be an expert on any one of these topics. But so much of what your brand can do is actually amplify those external stakeholders who are experts around these topics. And that has certainly been our approach. So for topics around racial justice, climate change, so on and so forth, how can we partner with the experts around these topics and give them amplification through our brand voice?
Can I jump in and give an interesting case study, something we did at Phluid with Procter & Gamble. So Procter & Gamble has a product, tampon and pad line called Elle, and it's an organic tampon line. And they wanted to share the perspective of folks who haven't been heard when it comes to periods and bleeding. And they wanted to hear from non-binary folks, sex-assigned birth females, and trans masculine men who are still having periods. And it's really interesting. So this is a space that they were cautious to enter, but wanted to do it. And so they reached out and we went through a process of, first we trained the entire organization about gender identity. So everyone knows who they're working with. We had a focus group so they could listen into the conversation. And then we cast the models and spokespeople as always considering gender identity, but also race and the intersectionality of all humans to make sure there's representation and visibility. And then as the product comes out, it's vetted through, and the cameramen or camera people were from the community, and it's an entirely thought out. And so when it comes to market, it's so well received because it's done with authenticity, and it's done from corporate folks listening to the people that they're reaching out to, as opposed to just guessing or just leaning into your internal employee resource group, which has limitations and they don't have all the answers. So what I think is important from this case study is that it's important to go to the communities to listen, and then to reach out and use the communities, leverage the communities, and pay them to be part of the project. And so you're supporting them all the way through in every aspect.
Great.
Just real quick, I feel like what I'm hearing, and I don't want to try to sum everybody up, but I just love that the planning and execution of an authentic mission behind what you're doing is what needs to be planned. Marketing is almost a byproduct. And I do in an agency space, I see so many brands come in and say, oh, what's the marketing we can put out that is in this kind of social impact area? They recognize the size of the market, they recognize the importance of young people, and they jump straight to what can we say. And it's so important that everybody's going to see through that right away if you don't have anything behind it to back it up. How are you auditing yourself? What numbers do you have internally to show that you actually care? Or are you just going to try to kind of cover up and say some nice fluffy things that are going to make people feel good about your brand? And the beautiful thing is, young people have led the way in calling that out. It's not easy to step out there if you don't have numbers and information to back that up. So I think what I'm hearing from everybody here is you have to be very authentic and real about what it is you're trying to do. and measure that, not the retweets and the social engagement. That will come when you have an authentic plan in mind.
You just got me to my next question, Javin. Such great tips. Thank you all. You're talking about measurement, Javin, and I know you talked a little bit earlier when we spoke about CSR and ESG and what the terms we're using to coin it, and how the CSR, formerly known CSR space, has truly evolved, and how it needs to be baked in. But how do you measure it? It's so, we at the Ad Council, we have a research department, dedicated to measuring attitudes and behaviors, which is incredibly challenging. We're not measuring, we're not looking at sales from products. It's really hard to measure some key attitudinal and behavioral changes. Really broad question, but I'd love your perspective, as many of you as want to jump in, on how you look at measurement, how you know you've done well.
Sure. Yeah, I think, and for all the data analysts out there, I'll apologize in advance for kind of skimming over this and maybe using some wrong terminology. But in essence, what we see is a gamut of starting with this idea of engagement, of putting content out there and ensuring that you're getting your message out in front of people. And that's a good starting place to at least put out a message, and even if it's internal. I just said kind of earlier, I don't want you to start with this idea of, oh, what do we shell out in front of our consumers as this big, inauthentic, social good drumbeat. But even to your internal staff, even if it's, for racial inequity or, topics that are relevant to your staff, even have open, honest conversations with them and see, like, are people reading this? Is this resonating? Do people want to hear this type of language? And then you can move forward from there, I think, and start to look at, numbers that then show that you're following the rules that you're setting out there. So what are your hiring practices? What does your diversity look like within your organization? Are you actually, if you're an organization around education, are you actually spending time reading to children and funding initiatives in your community versus just saying, oh yeah, we're doing things? And the conversation we had earlier was so good around the idea that CSR, this term of social responsibility, is an intention, and it's good, but we want to move beyond responsibility to passion and desire, and eventually get to the place where we're looking externally to our organizations and saying, who can actually judge us and tell us what it is we're doing? And you have brands going towards B Corp certifications, or the ESG terminology for a lot of larger brands, this idea of grading companies on their environmental and social and governance policies, and really having a metric that says, hey, it's no longer an intention, it's now a number, and we're all graded on that number. And as we move forward in building a better world, we're going to have to live by the numbers that we've got and the brands that we've created.
Yeah, I can jump in. I think there are two key categories that, depending on the initiative, are how we measure success. So first and foremost, given our demographic awareness, I think COVID-19 was an incredible example of what our key goal was to just make sure that young people across America understood this really bizarre and confusing and critical role that they played. So at a really high level, how many people are we letting know how they can make a difference? And then I think from the tech standpoint, which I know we might get to later in the panel, is what tools are we building to help users around some of the things that they want more tools around? So whether that be, tools to help them do things like voter registration or mental health resources amidst moments like COVID-19. How are we measuring how many users are interacting with these tools, how long they're interacting with them for? Are these resources that they actually find beneficial? And I'll say one thing that's been particularly inspiring for this portfolio has been just the response from employees to be proud to work at a place that really champions this type of work. And I do think that is a big part of how we measure success here at Snapchat.
Awesome. And Snapchat has been incredible partners to the Ad Council, and we're so grateful. And I think it's a good lead in. I love the technology, start to the technology conversation. Technology has been so valuable and meaningful for social good at the Ad Council, and I'm sure many, many other places. It's been huge. We've been creating Alexa skills to teach people about food waste and opioid abuse, and Snapchat filters whenever possible with Sophia and the team. So I would love to just hear a little bit from you guys about where do you think the greatest opportunities are, with technology? Any examples from your companies or things that you've seen?
Yeah.
I got to start out by saying, with technology, my Alexa is going crazy right now, because you said it's hysterical. I don't know if anybody else is, but she's good. She's talking to me like crazy. So funny.
Always listening.
It's so funny. Mine didn't hear me, and she's not far.
I'm going to go back on mute because she's not done yet.
She knows we're on the panel.
I have Google Home products and it's not going off.
Great plug, Natasha. So I spent last year doing an assessment with my co-author around how companies could play a difference in helping increase voter turnout. Our democracy is really broken just from an accessibility standpoint, especially for demographics who are particularly at risk from a voter suppression standpoint, whether that be the youth population or many demographics, which Natasha alluded to in her introduction as well. I think that what is really critical is just thinking through how many corporations and brands have access to resources to help better connect citizens to our democracy, whether that be things like voter registration, voter education, or voter participation. I think what's been amazing is the founding of civic coalitions to really help companies individually understand how they can play a role in fixing our democracy. I truly believe this, but I think if every corporation did a version of voter registration and voter participation, whether it be activating their own employees to register to vote or their consumers and their users to register to vote, that will truly change the fabric of our democracy. And I think for a generation which has grown up using their smartphones to do everything, it is pretty unbelievable that the only thing they can't do is engage civically through tools on those smartphones. So how can we really think through how to leverage technology to make this whole conversation around voting easy? I always tease this out, but there are so many PSAs out there like register to vote, it only takes a couple minutes. And that's not true. Registering to vote is super complicated. It's so hard to check up on your voter registration status and understand where you're even supposed to vote. Amidst COVID, there are so many different ways you can vote. What is the difference between voting absentee and voting by mail? Does that mean you can also show up in person if you don't have the chance to mail it in? So we at Snapchat are really thinking through how we can leverage the tools that we have in app to build out those voter accessibility options this election cycle. And I would encourage everybody tuning in to think through the role that they can play in helping really fix our democracy.
I'll jump in, I guess, while everybody's thinking. One issue, and I don't know if this is solved yet, but I think it's obviously not because it's still an issue, this idea of digital inclusion. And I think almost everybody on this panel recognizes, whether it's through e-commerce or through the tools that we're creating, that technology is absolutely necessary for individuals to stay involved in society, to move forward in education and job growth. And we have such a problem with equality when it comes to the training, the ability to access technology. And some clients that we're working with right now are really fighting to figure that out. How do we take technology? How do we donate it? How do we get it into everybody's hands? So when we talk about even using tools like Snapchat to vote, or to be able to use a suite of Google tools to have email and to have documents and to have all these different tools at your disposal, it's important that everybody has one. We're all at home educating our children, and in a lot of areas, we have iPads and we can screencast with a teacher, and everything has changed, don't get me wrong, but we still have access in communities that have those resources, and there are a lot of communities that don't, and those resources don't go home with kids, and there isn't training, and there isn't support from family. And so that idea of technology inequality is going to be so big, and the pandemic has done nothing but show how badly we need that. And this next school year, we're really going to recognize how much it's going to hurt people when they don't have the tools they need to succeed.
And then for me, when I think about technology and democracy, because this is what I'm hearing, the number one opportunity that I think is sort of critical to this is how do we find out the best way to get the best information out to people? And I say that because, we cannot deny there's a huge issue with misinformation and conspiracy theories. And unfortunately, that can at times cloud sort of the opportunities that exist with technology, because yes, you have everyone on these social platforms, but if they're confused half the time, or they don't know what's right or what's wrong or what to follow, that sort of just can add more chaos. And I think we've all seen and experienced that. So to me, that's a huge opportunity, and that's something I have really great hope for, that as we're all becoming more familiar with the technology, the potential for it, to me, that's sort of like the next big challenge, that if we can get past that, I think we will truly see the power of technology to transform something like our democracy.
It's a great point, Jen. And I hope, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot of efforts and campaigns out there in the coming months, kind of addressing the misinformation. I know it's something we're looking at, and so important, especially this year. So I know, just as a reminder, let's submit our questions to the Q&A as you have them. We're going to take them at the end, but the hour's going by really quickly, so we might be at the end soon. So don't forget to get your questions in there, because we definitely want to hear from the audience. But I want to talk about nonprofits and others and brands who are cash strapped. It's a tough time with, you know, post-COVID, a lot of economic challenges. How can you make social good a priority when you don't have a lot of resources at some of these important moments?
I'll jump in. It doesn't always take money to do good. You know, we all have access and influence to varying degrees, whether it's our own network or if we're companies, we have large influence. But with no money at all, you can start to do good. You can start to create change and education and influence towards social justice and doing the right thing. And I think that everyone thinks it takes $1 million to make change. You know, it doesn't take $1 million. It takes some money. You know, we at Phluid have done different things. We allocated 20% of all of our sales to go back to the community, specifically queer, Black and brown communities who are the most marginalized in many cases, especially trans women of color, and tried to like put our money into the communities most in need right now. But one of the fun things we did was we took $1,000 and we asked folks to put their Venmo or PayPal account in, and we paid them directly. We bypassed all the nonprofits and we went directly to the folks in need, which was so much fun because people were just like, we didn't ask questions. If you need money, we're going to give it to you. So you don't need $1 million to make an impact. You need a good idea. You need some social influence, and then start to like put good stuff out there and to watch it spread, you know. And I'm always amazed by Instagram and other social media that just somebody posts something really positive and it just spreads like wildfire. And that's as much impact as $1 million is sometimes, you know, this positive messaging.
I'll just also lean into what I said earlier. I think that so many of these huge corporate brands are looking for experts like you to help amplify your voice. So my background is political, so I always make this joke, but I'm really good with rejection. So like, you should totally reach out to these orgs and these brands and see what they might be able to do for you guys and really amplify your messaging. And worst comes to worst, you might get the no, but it's totally worth knocking on that door.
I'd say a +1 to Sophia. Unfortunately, budget cuts are what they are, and with the economic downturn that we've been experiencing. But again, with this moment, understanding the importance of social good for brands, there's going to be some opportunity. Maybe it's unlocking not maybe $1 million, but maybe it's $10,000 to $15,000. And I think what I love about working with nonprofits is because they are inherently scrappy, right? They know how to do a lot with a little. And you have consumers who are really, really hungry for those type of feel-good initiatives. So I think just being able to just get super scrappy, I think nonprofits do a really good job of that. Like Sophia said, really still being bold and going and putting out the ask to bigger corporations, holding them accountable for the things that they're saying they're going to do on social media, and then putting the mirror up to them and saying, here, now support this initiative. I really trust in nonprofits' ability to be scrappy and to continue to do good with little resources. And again, doing this fundraising, I've seen a number of fundraisers, whether it's for the Black Lives Matter movement, for healthcare workers who are on the front lines battling COVID. I've seen a lot of these smaller initiatives really get attention from consumers because it's pulling on their heartstrings right now.
Yeah.
And I'd like to add that something to recognize again is that for some of us, for some of our communities, it is a sense of urgency. It isn't a choice on whether we get to address some things. So for example, when COVID happened, you know, working at Univision, we had a lot of the same challenges. We were forced to sort of shift our priorities. A lot of our projects were, you know, being changed, a lot of things being on hold, reorgs, we had everything. However, when COVID was happening, and as somebody who, again, I'm Latina, I identify as the community that I serve, In LA, for example, when I saw what was happening, right as the shutdowns were happening, I noticed that LA could not shut down as quickly as San Francisco because LAUSD predominantly services Hispanic students, Hispanic Latinx students, 75%. 80% of the students who go to that school get a meal when they go to that school. So for us, it wasn't just a, hey, this would be a great thing to do. It was like, we need to do this because it means whether somebody in our community eats. So for us, again, we sort of identified, okay, what do we have access to? We have this great, and again, this sort of piggybacks of what Sophia has been saying and Rob's been saying, we have a great group of influencers who are already creating content. They're already doing, we didn't have to create anything. We just said, hey, they're already creating content. They're great at it. They reach the audience that we want to connect with. How can we add value? So what we did is we partnered, we're lucky enough to have a chief medical correspondent within Univision. We got the correct information of, okay, how can our people stay safe? Because also a lot of Latinx community has been frontline workers, essential workers. How do we disperse the correct information? We were able to get sort of like a, hey, yes, all of our influencers, in the next lives that you do, please utilize this information. It's the best information on how people can stay safe and healthy with COVID. Washing your hands 6 feet away, all of those things. And then also we had all of our influencers commit to promoting local food banks. Whether you could afford to donate to those local food banks, or B, if it was a resource that somebody in our community needed, please go utilize that resource because it was there for them. So we had that series, it was called Kickback. We hosted it on Instagram Live. It was very successful. We hosted it for over 3 months. And again, the great part of it is we were able to empower, inform, and entertain our audience, all those things. And we were able to utilize our influencers to really be good ambassadors during that time of the best information and also social good.
I love that. I mean, I think, at the Ad Council, we were pro bono and low bono, as we say, significantly reduced rate. So I think we might have coined it, but the power of aligning with the right talent, with the right partners is critically important. We're such big believers in the coalition model too, and finding like-minded organizations. So I want to ask a question that is connected to an audience question, actually, about how you bring in the right partners, how you find brands and others that are aligned, and how you develop kind of partnerships that work well for everybody.
I'm happy to jump in. I think that back to our earlier conversation around strategic approach, there are kind of two key ways to approach this social good conversation in app that we align our activations around. So first and foremost, what do we care about all the time? So what are our quote unquote always on campaigns in relation to what we value here at Snap, and who are long-term partners that we know can help us have those discussions with our users? And then of course there's in the moment reacting to what is happening in the world and which voices we can help amplify as well. I do think what is really interesting is that given what we have invested in to date, those have also been a lot of the partners who we can amplify in key moments as well. So just really bringing together a longer term plan and investing in key external stakeholders who might not be the actual voices that you end up amplifying, but also can serve as advisors to the initiatives that you also want to run towards. And you can also look to those voices when you're also reacting to what is happening and seeing what you can amplify in app. And then I think one thing that's really critical too is inspiring peer-to-peer conversations. This is something we talk a lot about at Snapchat, but it's one thing for us to put things in app around Black Lives Matter in the moment, but how do we make sure that the conversation on racial justice continues just past what's happening in the news? So making sure that we are fitting it into our real tentpole campaigns, and making sure that we have things like creative tools, so fun filters and lenses, that really help our users contextualize and have these conversations through some of the voices external to our corporation, but that help us have these conversations as well.
Yeah, I think we sit in the middle of this conversation quite often when it comes to larger brands recognizing, hey, we want to do something. Our employees want us to have a specific cause in mind, or we want to give back through some specific campaign or program, and then connecting that to the ground in an authentic way. That's a space that we sit in a lot, and I would encourage brands that want to do this to look around, because there are a lot of PR companies, a lot of consulting companies, and even a lot of backbone foundations, funds, nonprofits that assist in this. I mean, this is that federated model. This is what United Way historically has been known for, is to take brands, help them align with local needs, and make that happen. And whether that's skills-based volunteering or that's actual dollars, which was said, I think, Natasha, by you earlier, scrappy is every nonprofit, even organizations of that scale are scrappy. You have no idea what $5,000, $10,000, I mean, that is a massive amount of money for them to fund an intern for half a year or whatever it becomes. And so I would encourage individuals, like any other problem solving, get out there, talk to professionals, network. There are plenty of groups now of people trying to do this, and get your resources lined up, because you don't have to do it alone. There are plenty of groups and plenty of brands. I mean, this grid of 9 people in front of you are all people that have gone through this, figured out who needs to be at the table to make impact with your brand, and you can do it.
And
Yeah.
I'll add just one other thing, Ellyn. I know, look, I work at a massive company, and I don't even know who the proper person to go to for, to pitch some of these opportunities. And I can imagine it's going to be even worse for people in smaller nonprofits externally. But what I would, a suggestion that I would offer that's maybe like a creative way to get in is really think about your nonprofit and their mission, and see, we have a number of ERGs across Google. We have a Black ERG, we have a Latinx ERG, we have LGBTQ.
The gigglers.
Gigglers, exactly. We have the gigglers, and so we have we have people with disabilities ERG at Google. So I would think, like, look at some of these bigger companies and try to maybe get in with the people that you know that your cause is going to resonate with, and then find who are some of those ERG leaders and pitch them, because they have a ton of power to move the conversation forward, because that's what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So it's just offering just another creative way to do it, because all the other more people who work in the traditional social good space, they're probably inundated with a number of requests that they're getting. But the people who actually care about these causes and these causes resonate with them personally are the ones that can help push the conversation forward internally.
The one thing I'll also flag that I think is super helpful is that a lot of the time for brands, they're thinking through what moments work for them. And the one thing I'm trying to get into a better practice of is asking our partners around these sensitive topics, which moments are most critical to when they want to amplify their voice in their messaging. And that has really informed how we approach it from a calendar year standpoint, which I think has made the work really that much more meaningful to the organizations that we're working with, right? So that way it really is a two-way partnership. If we want to do something around mental health awareness when Snapchat wants to, that's great, but then how can we also make sure we're also providing amplification for the key moments that our partner also cares about as an organization?
It's such a great point. It really needs to be mutually beneficial to think about it from all sides. I want to go, I can't believe we're at 10 of, I don't know how that happened. I want to go to an audience question real quick. From Dina, how do more nonprofits connect with socially good brands? Is there an app, a way, a marketplace where brands can find nonprofits and nonprofits can find brands? Especially in this time, small nonprofits are dying because so many donors have stopped donating. So sponsorships and social good brands are crucial to keep nonprofits going. You guys know of any good resources? I mean, I think, yeah, go ahead, Javin.
No, yeah, I feel like I should. I mean, in the space that we're in, I know that there have been over the years platforms that kind of connected corporate events or nonprofit events with corporate sponsorships and partnerships. But, you know, the space of softwares and applications that serve the nonprofit space, they're it's a rough space to make profits. And I've seen a lot of those organizations come and go. So as of right now, I don't have any, but maybe if we're sharing contact information, I could do a little digging on that one for some of the people who are attending, because it's so crucial to have, and I don't know that I have a good answer for you. Hopefully somebody else does. I'll look around.
Okay. All right, so let's go to the future. Now that we're getting close to the end of this panel, where do you guys think the biggest opportunities are? We talked about technology earlier. Where do you think the biggest opportunities lie in the near and long term for social good?
I mean, something that I'm really interested in seeing is, I think for at least a large portion of my career, it's be working in media. The focus has really been on scale, reach, global, big, huge. biggest numbers. And I really think, especially with COVID, we're recognizing how important it is to have a good infrastructure locally. So I think it might be interesting to see maybe a shift from not necessarily leaving a global perspective, but also a new recognition of the importance of local again, and niche. Because again, like with COVID, I mean, we recognize that having a good local support system with everything, whether it's food, access to, technology, anything, local is something I think we need to pay attention to and invest in.
I'll just jump in real quick. I like to always say, like, we're always in a state of unlearning and relearning. And the future to me is the future is something different than we know. And I think we're beginning to see the future through the call from, every human across this planet saying enough is enough when it comes to social justice and the environment. I'd like to say that, when I look at change has to happen when we start to understand that, and this sounds a little far, but gender is a construct, race is a construct, and they're created to disenfranchise and suppress groups of people, that it's time to start to look at the system and to break the system apart to allow other people to be successful, and others are brought into categories by race and by gender and different abilities, and that it's time for us to educate ourselves, not about anyone else, but I've spent lots of documentaries and podcasts and educating myself on why groups of people have not had opportunities to live the full life that I have. And so I think the future is bright because we're doing the work right now, because we've been awoken, and we are going to let Generation Z lead us to the future, because they're the ones, young millennials and Generation Z and alphas are the future. And that's what gets me excited, about leaning into them and letting them lead us the way and supporting them.
I agree with that, Rob. Like, I'm also very encouraged. I think there's been other moments in time where we've seen that the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion and systemic racism comes and goes. But this time feels very different. I think it was a real reckoning and awakening that was like 400 years in the making. So I'm really encouraged about the future of social good, particularly on the strides that we're going to make in diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just from a race perspective, but gender fluidity, your sexual preferences. I really think that we're in a state where we're going to become a more welcoming society, and I'm really celebrating other people's differences. And I think we're going to start to see brands playing a bigger role in improving humanity across the board. No longer are we going to be looking to our governments to be doing this. It really is our big corporations and brands that are going to be leading the way.
No surprise, I will combine Natasha and Jen's responses. I truly think that the future is bettering our democracy, because that is the best way to take action around all the conversations and topics we've spoken a lot about today. A lot of my work is spent having conversations with experts in racial justice, gun control, climate change, so on and so forth. And one of the biggest ways that they say they want to see Snapchat making a difference is encouraging our users to engage in civic participation. So I think what's really important is that we're not just doing it during federal election years. During the 2018 midterms, we helped over 450,000 people register to vote. 60% of those users were 18 to 24-year-olds. So just really making sure that we're investing in this next generation. When you turn 18 on Snapchat, you don't get a PSA to go skydiving. You get an invitation to register to vote. Just last week, we helped 1,600 Americans register to vote as soon as they turn 18. So all of our brands have a role to play in this whole beautiful but imperfect thing we call democracy. And I really think, again, that every brand has a strategic role to play in helping us improve the fabric of that democracy. So I hope people understand the importance of it, again, not just during federal election cycles, but all the time, wherever you are.
I love that. I think the thing I'm so excited to see is, Rob, you started that conversation around this younger generations picking up the baton and really taking it forward. I love that more and more people across all generations are coming to the table. I have 2 kids. It gave me a lot of gray hair. I feel like I'm in a place where I have learned so much in my journey. And I think the rest of us kind of people who have spent time starting this conversation, the young people are taking that baton in such a healthy way and taking it so much farther than we ever could have in one generation. And so I'm excited to see that we got amped. Their energy got us even more amped because people were listening, and early on in our career, they were not. And it feels like 10 years ago, this was such a harder conversation to have. And historically, our countries and our generations do these big pendulum swings back and forth of what matters. And we feel it in politics and in religion. And it's so hard. You almost just have people going opposite directions. This is one where we started this domino, chain of events. And I feel like young people are taking it from us and going, yep, and we're just going to take it that much further and keep going and going. And it's super inspiring.
And I just want to add one last thing to my comment. As, again, agreeing with Sophia, Natasha, everyone who's already been talking about, again, just a transformation in our society and how we treat each other. I just want to share, I'm reading an amazing book, and I just wanted to share it with everyone. It's called How to Be an Anti-Racist. This is probably one of the best books I've read in a long time, so just want to take a moment. Book recommendation for anybody who's interested in social good. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it.
Awesome. I can't believe it. We have 3 minutes left. Let's do rapid fire. Give your best tip, one tip to a brand or nonprofit on how they can make a meaningful impact in the social good space. Go. Sophia, go.
Find your champions. The only way I've been able to do this work at Snapchat is from finding people across the organization who don't have CSR titles to believe in this work and want to contribute in any way they can, whether it's a comms person, an engineer, someone on our product team. That's the only way I'm able to do anything. Otherwise, I will only be alone. We are so much more together. Every organization has champions, so make sure to cultivate yours.
I'll go. Be authentic. Go to the originals, the people who are the OGs in the space, and don't try to save the whole world. You're not going to be able to do it, but pick a couple lanes and do them really well.
I'll piggyback on Rob's. I think it's just know who the people are who look up to you, be influential in the right way with those individuals, and be realistic. It's easy to think big and save the world. I always go there, and the places that make the most impact is when I narrow it down, and it's something I can really do on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I'll say approach social good as you would with any other marketing challenge. Start with empathy, be authentic, and be consistent, more importantly.
If you don't ask, you don't know. Do not be afraid to just ask and reach out. Don't reject yourself before you even made the ask. So definitely just go for it and try.
Well, thank you so much to our incredible panelists. I loved all the tangible tips, the case studies, the quotes, the book recommendations, the recommendations on partnerships, and this was incredible. I feel like we could talk for a few more hours, but and thank you to our whole audience for joining us. Definitely submit your shorties, learn more about the panelists. You can follow them on social, and you can learn more about the AI Council following us too. Thank you so much, all of you. I really appreciate it. And I know the audience does too. Have a great night.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Ellen.
Thank you.
Ellen.